Hi all. Imagine that you are trapped in backrooms. It sounds very scary, but this happens to everyone. Today I will tell you 4 scary and frightening stories associated with this place. First story. This story happened to me several years ago, but I still cannot forget those terrible moments that I had to endure in the mysterious backrooms. It all started that evening when I decided to explore one of the old abandoned buildings in my city. I've always been drawn to the desolation and mystery of places like this, and felt that this could be an interesting adventure. Using a flashlight and courage, I entered the building through the broken lock on the back door. As soon as I got inside, I was overcome by a feeling that something was wrong. The building seemed much larger from the inside than from the outside, and I quickly realized that I was disorientated. The corridors seemed endless, and the walls were covered with yellow, worn wallpaper, as if this place had been forgotten by time. When I tried to go back, I discovered that the doors through which I had entered had disappeared. My panic began to grow as I continued to wander through these endless corridors, rushing about in search of a way out. However, every time I thought I had found a door, it only led me to another labyrinth, and each corridor was the same as the previous one. Time lost its meaning, and I could not tell how many hours or days I spent in this nightmare. I was exhausted by hunger and thirst, but there was no food or water anywhere. My body began to rebel, and I began to hear strange sounds, jumping away from every rustle around me. One day, as I was wandering in the dark, I saw something terrible. A creature, something absolutely indescribable, was slowly creeping up towards me. It had long, twisted limbs. Its skin seemed rotted and weathered, and its eyes were devoid of any meaning. I screamed and started to run, but despite all my efforts, it was getting closer and closer. My heart was beating so fast that I was sure it was about to burst. At the last moment, I found some door and, without hesitation, burst through it. This time I found myself in a different place, but my nightmare was not over. There were other horrors, other creatures, and other labyrinths. I couldn't afford to wander around the backrooms anymore. I ran as fast as I could, ignoring the pain and fatigue. And finally, after many hours of research and fear, I found a solution. I got out into the light and breathed in the fresh air, but I was left with scars on my soul that forever remind me of this terrible story. Backrooms is a place where no one should go. This is a world from which there is no way out, and where horrors await you that it is better not to think about. The continuation of my story is somewhere at the intersection of reality and nightmare. After my escape from the abandoned building that seemed to be backrooms, I found myself in the city, but something was wrong. The streets were empty, and there was no sound of life around. I tried to find familiar places, but everything seemed foreign and useless. Time passed, and I realized that this was not my city. It was a place that seemed somewhat similar to reality, but everything about it was distorted and different. The endless streets seemed to lead nowhere, and I continued to wander, trying to find a way out. I felt hungry and thirsty, just like in the backrooms, and there seemed to be no shops, no cafes, no living souls here. Hours and days blurred into one stream, and I began to doubt my sanity. My memories became chaotic, and I experienced moments from the past that seemed like some kind of mixed fragments of reality and nightmare. At some point, I met another person. He too was lost and scared. We tried to look for a way out together, but we had no idea where we really were. Our conversations became less meaningful, and it seemed to me that this place had spoiled our consciousness as well. After several long weeks, or perhaps months, we have finally found a way out of this nightmare reality. We found ourselves in a city that was similar to our native one, but still somehow alien. We separated, and each of us tried to return to normal life. The mysterious place I experienced remained in my memory as a nightmare that seemed more real than I could have imagined. I couldn't tell if it was a dream or reality, but I knew one thing. I never want to go to backrooms or similar places again. Second story. This was the day when things didn't go as I planned. My friends and I decided to take part in urbex, and explore an old abandoned building that had been rumored in our city. We were sure that it would be an exciting adventure, but we could not even imagine what a nightmare we would end up in. When we entered the building through the broken lock, we immediately felt a strange atmosphere. It was gloomy and stuffy inside, and the air seemed saturated with years of oblivion. Our flashlights revealed a picture of endless corridors with cracked walls and dust that seemed to hang in the air untouched by time. We started walking forward, trying to find interesting places for photos and videos, but the deeper we moved inside, the more alien and hateful this place became. It was as if the building itself did not want to see us here. After some time, when we had already lost our bearings and began to realize that we could not find a way out, things began to get even stranger. Time began to become distorted. Our clocks did not move as they should, and day and night mingled. The voices in our heads became louder, and we began to hear rustling and shuffling around the corners, but there were no visible sources of sounds. Panic gripped us, and we rushed forward, trying to find a way out of this terrible trap. But the longer we wandered, the more distorted our memories and minds became. I began to doubt that we would ever find a way out of this place. And then, when my hope ran out, I saw her. A creature, without a face, with red eyes, was slowly approaching me. It curved and slid across the floor like butter. Horror overwhelmed me, and I began to run until the creature disappeared into the darkness. Hours, days, and perhaps even weeks passed as I wandered through this nightmare. My friends disappeared, and I was left alone. Every corner, every door led me only to a new nightmare, and I could not find a way out. As time passed, I felt my strength leaving me. Hunger and thirst weakened my body, and the imminent danger always remained nearby. I don't know how much time has passed, but I'm still in this nightmare, in these endless backrooms, and I'm afraid that there is no way out of them anymore. The continuation of my story in this nightmare is endless chaos that goes on and on like sleepless nights, and I can't find either an end or a way out. My strength and hopes faded, and I was left only with myself and my nightmares. With each day that passed, I became more exhausted and exhausted. I kept hearing those rustling and shuffling noises, but never saw their source. The red-eyed creature I had seen earlier returned, but remained at a distance, watching me like a shadow. My memories of the outside world became increasingly blurry, and I often doubted whether this reality was real or just a product of my nightmare. Time seemed timeless, and days followed nights without any visible sign of the sun or moon. Hunger and thirst were my constant companions, but there was no food or water. My body and mind were on the verge of exhaustion, and I was afraid that I would not have the strength to fight. Through the darkness and chaos I continued to walk, and one day I came across a note scratched on the wall. "You are not alone." These words revived hope in me. Someone else was here. Someone else was experiencing this nightmare. I decided to follow these words, and to my surprise, I found another person. He was exhausted and exhausted, but he was alive. We exchanged stories of what had happened and found that we were both lost in the nightmare. With the hope of salvation, we began to explore together, and finally, after many days or even weeks of wandering, we found the door. For the first time in a very long time, we had hope of getting out. We opened the door and found ourselves in a place that was similar to our hometown, but still somehow foreign. We went our separate ways, each eager to return to normal life, but we still had memories of the nightmare we experienced in the backrooms. And although we were able to get out of this nightmare reality, it left our souls wounded in a frightening secret that we cannot tell anyone who has not experienced it firsthand. It was a nightmare that will remain with us forever, reminding us of the endless labyrinths and horrors of backrooms. Third story. This story is about backrooms, a place that is better not to know about. I still remember this nightmare, although someone tried to erase my memory. It all started that night when I decided to conduct an expedition into one of the deepest and most dangerous abandoned zones. My friends and I were always thrill seekers, and backrooms presented a real challenge. We entered this dark labyrinth through the door of an old warehouse. The first level was still normal long corridors, shabby walls, and a mixed smell of dust and dampness. But with each level, everything became stranger and scarier. On the second level, there were low tunnels, as if someone had dug them out with their hands. The maze became more complex, and we began to get lost. But we were interested, and we continued to move deeper, despite the feeling of danger. On the third level, we first met the mysterious inhabitants of the backrooms. They were like shadows, moving around us, and we heard their rustling sounds, but never saw them. We tried to avoid contact, but it was not always possible. The fourth level was a real nightmare. Here, the voices in our heads became louder and more aggressive. They whispered strange phrases, and we began to doubt our sanity. The labyrinth became alive and changing, and we felt that it was trying to confuse us. Something terrible happened on level 5. My friend Eric was taken over by something and disappeared. We heard his screams, but could not find him. He simply disappeared into the darkness of this nightmare. On the next level, we discovered an abandoned office, which contained notes and documents about backrooms. It was as if someone was trying to study this nightmare. We tried to study the documents, but suddenly we felt like something was trying to erase our memory. We fought against this force, but it was strong. We lost some of our memories of the past, but we did not let it happen completely. We remembered the backrooms and decided that we should get out of here and warn others. At the next level, with difficulty holding our minds, we found a way out. We got out, but nothing has been the same since then. Our lives changed, and the nightmare of backrooms remained with us forever. We now know that he exists, and despite attempts to erase our memories, we remember his horror. The continuation of my story concerns something even more mysterious and terrible than backrooms. After we got out of this nightmare, something even stranger and more terrible began. A few weeks after our release, as I tried to return to normal life, strange things began to happen. I noticed people on the streets of the city, but they were wearing black masks that completely hid their faces. They watched me, always at a distance, but always present. My friends who also visited the backrooms started complaining about the same thing. We thought it might just be paranoia caused by our fears and memories. But it soon became obvious that this was not fantasy. One day, when I was returning home, I was waylaid by a group of these people in black masks. They stepped on my freedom and then started trying to erase my memories of the backrooms. They used some strange devices and injections, but my memories were too strong and stable. I fought, trying to protect my memories, and at some point I even managed to escape. But they didn't leave me alone. They continued to pursue me, and each attempt to erase my memories became more aggressive and more mysterious. My friends seemed to have been less fortunate. They disappeared one by one, and I had no more contact with them. I was the only one who was able to survive and retain my memories. Ultimately, I found a hidden community of explorers who also survived the nightmare of backrooms and were attacked by people in black masks. Together, we began an investigation and searched for answers. We discovered that backrooms are not just a place, but something much more complex and dangerous. Over time, we were able to find a way to protect ourselves from attempts to erase our memories and make these mysterious pursuers stop. But the horrors of the backrooms will forever remain in our memories and will remind us that some nightmares can engulf even the most daring explorers. Fourth story. This night, like any other, started normally. I woke up feeling very thirsty and decided to get up for a drink of water. After all, nothing foreshadowed trouble. So I carefully left the bedroom and headed towards the kitchen. The lighting in my house was low, and the shadows created strange shapes on the walls. But I didn't attach any importance to this, because my only goal is water. I went to the sink, turned on the faucet, and filled a glass. The water ran in an icy stream, and I began to drink, feeling how it refreshed me. But suddenly the light in the room went out, and I found myself in complete darkness. At first I thought it was just a power outage, but when I tried to turn on the light on my phone, I had an alarming thought. The phone didn't work. It was completely turned off. Suddenly, my feet found themselves in something cold and wet. I lowered my hand and realized that I was standing in water that shouldn't be here. Panic gripped me, and I began to walk forward, trying to find a way out of this unknown trap in the darkness. The slippery, cold surface of the floor made me fall again and again. I scratched my arms and legs, and the bruises appeared instantly. My heart was pounding in unison with my fears when I heard rustling and sounds coming from the darkness. Something unknown was next to me. It made inhuman sounds, and its approach made me get up and run again. I did not see what it was, but I felt that my life was in danger. I ran and ran, but there was no way out. Time seemed to slow down, and I had no idea how much time I spent in this nightmare. My bruises hurt, but the adrenaline didn't let me stop. And suddenly, when it seemed that my legs could no longer carry me, I woke up. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was lying in my bed, sweaty and with abrasions on my body. I thought it was all just a nightmare, but my bruises were real, and my skin was painfully red and bruised. This experience left me in a state of shock, and I still could not understand whether this was a real backrooms or an extremely realistic dream. But one thing I knew for sure, this nightmare would remain in my memory for a long time, forever reminding me of the terrible horrors and senseless darkness that awaits us, even when we think we are safe. The days after that nightmare were spent in an exhausting struggle with anxiety and strange memories. My bruises healed, but my soul remained wounded. I felt that this was more than just a nightmare, and that this place, the backrooms, could come back to finish the job. After a few weeks, I started having strange dreams. I found myself in the same gloomy labyrinthine environment, with the same narrow corridors and hopeless doors, and every time I entered the room, it turned into the nightmare place from my original dream. Fear gripped me like excitement before a storm, and I realized that these were not just dreams. This was something darker, something that was trying to return me to the backrooms. I began to avoid sleep, afraid of losing my mind again. But this was just the beginning. Every day I began to notice that reality and dreams were merging into one. I saw strange pieces of backrooms in everyday life, doors leading to nowhere, flickering shadows on the walls, and even those creatures that haunted my nightmare. I felt that I was being watched. Somehow the entities from the nightmare began to penetrate into reality. I was afraid that they were going to take me back inside this dark, absurd universe that I had such a hard time escaping from. And then one day, when I was alone at home and suddenly felt an invasion of power, fear took possession of me. I rushed to the exit, but the door was blocked. The shadows began to slowly approach, and I realized that there was no way to escape. The confusion between reality and nightmare became so strong that I no longer understood what was reality. I heard whispers and rustling sounds, and my mind began to fall apart. I could no longer distinguish where the nightmare ended and reality began. My story ended in madness, in the same darkness in which it began. Since then, my body has not been found, and I have remained a prisoner of the dark backrooms, deprived of my memory and personality. Now I have become part of this nightmare, wandering forever in its endless labyrinths, and looking for hope for a way out that may no longer exist.